Hello, welcome back. This is Wirksworth Part 2, the outside of the church, and you can see behind me how enormous this building is. The Anglo-Saxon building would have been much, much smaller, standing on some part of the current site, but we don't really know which one, because to investigate would involve going down through the floor, and there are burials in the floor. So, yep, there goes the bells. That's 1:45. So we'll have a look around the outside and see what we can see. So as with the inside, we start at the west end. Big west window. This would have been a processional entrance in the Middle Ages. You can just see off to that side the old schoolhouse, which is a nice piece of Georgian Gothic, really. And the spire is slightly crooked. It has nothing on nearby Chesterfield, largely because it's a smaller spire. I suspect for the same reason as Chesterfield, which is that rather than covering it in copper, it was covered in lead. And lead absorbs the heat. It's quite a dark metal rather than reflecting it, and so what happens is that it effectively cooks the timbers. If the timbers aren't completely matured, completely fixed in place, they're just going to warp and distort, and that's why you've got this twisted spire. Same thing at Chesterfield. So we've got a nice big churchyard. Obviously lots of burials. There's the churchyard cross over there. We're in the middle of the town, but rather than the street running past the church is in a kind of close, a bit like a miniature cathedral close, really, and the church is a bit like a miniature cathedral, so that kind of suits it. Now, the main entrance, of course, historically would have been not the west door, that's, I say, his processional door, but the main entrance would have been the south porch. South porches are traditionally it's where you went into the church, unless there was some very, very good reason not to, like the whole village being on the north side, or like there being on the south side just a drop down to a river or something. But usually it's a south porch. Got quite a nice south porch. You see this has been restored in the 19th century, which I think is important. But basically it's local sandstone, and it's largely, well, the roof line of course is 15th century, but largely 14th century from the looks of it. The porch again is medieval with restoration, because I think that the stone here is quite crumbly at times. The porch here, stroll round to the porch. This is still the main entrance, although there's also an entrance in the north aisle for the entrance for those who need level access, which is nice. And a nice solid door there, nice doorway. You've got this nice, you see here these lancets. This is a sign of a 13th century buildings. Some roofing tiles have been dislodged. I'm not surprised given the weather we've had lately. So here we go. Obviously we're in the middle of a working town, so there'll be a few noises coming this way and that. You see there this nice solid central tower which just ties everything together. So this is the north transept with its 13th century windows, and then you've got this later insertion. This is of course the window that's there now is Victorian. In fact, you can see that this whole wall has been renewed above, at least above the door, in the 19th century. More Victorian windows, and we'll come around here and then we'll go back, not least have a look at that these stone coffins, which are always very interesting. These these medieval stone coffins, and again you have this feel. It's like a little cathedral close. Originally it would have had accommodation around it for the various priests who served the various altars in the church. Of course, with the Reformation that comes to an end, and you have a vicar. These are almshouses here, and you just have a vicar who looks after the parish. Just pause and let these people by. So here we are again. Again, you have these nice 13th century windows on the side there, which is a good indication of a major rebuild at that point, and then everything really west has been rebuilt again in the 14th century. But nice big central tower, a couple of gargoyles, always nice. You can just see the arched lancet windows in the lower stage there, and that, I think that may very well be a Norman tower that's then had bits added. Very nice old school, nice bit of Gothic revival. These are almshouses, so of course that is, almshouses is sheltered housing, ancient old-fashioned sheltered housing, so housing for the elderly and infirm. It's very, very important in a place like this, because you're going to have people who can't provide for themselves in their old age, and they need to be looked after by by charities. So we'll wander back and have a look at these stone coffins, because I do like these medieval stone coffins. And here again, we have an old table tomb, 1839, so quite late for table tombs. And we have these coffins. I do like these coffins. They're separate bits for the head. It's a very notable sort of medieval way of doing things. Because you're carving this out of a great lump of stone. There we are, this porch again. And here's an interesting point. Look at this door. You've got these pins in it. You remember Martin Luther pinning nailing the 95 Theses to the castle church door in Wittenberg. And this is sometimes represented as being some great unusual act of protest. Not at all. Church doors acted as bulletin boards. And we see them today. Quite often these Anglican churches, you'll have notices about particularly things like change of clergy or a meeting of the parochial church council or something like that, and they'll be pinned to the door. And you can see all these marks here. That's not woodworm, that's people have used it as a pin board. So Martin Luther wasn't defacing church property, he was just using the church notice board to put his notice up, just like any sensible professor would be doing. So here we are back at the coffins, and you can see here also you've got a piece of window. You can see there the glazing slot, that's where the glass goes in, and that's a pinnacle that's fallen off. And obviously pinnacles that fall off, generally it's because they're overly weathered, so you don't put them back on again. These coffins, they've been excavated during grave digging, because one of the things about these medieval graveyards is they're reused. That's why you've got the grave diggers in Hamlet, and why you have Yorick's skull is dug up. It's not something unusual, it's something that was normal in those days. You can see here you've got your coffin with the hole for the head, and here's another coffin of the same type. Medieval coffins. This one has a hole in the bottom, which suggests it may be used as a trough for something. I'm not sure that's very respectful, but that's life. And there we have again these almshouses. As I say, it's a part of the provision, of course, because everything is local in the Middle Ages and the early modern period, or most things, a particular place like this, it's local. It's not a matter of central government back in London will do things, it's a matter of local people, local charities will do local things locally. As again is this beautiful grammar school. I mean, it really is. You look at that and you think, this is a lot of money's been put into it, there's a lot of thought's been put into it. And it's an early example of Gothic revival. The old neoclassical stuff, you've still got some things like you see the scroll and swag on the plaque there, which unfortunately has been weathered clean, but that's classical. And it's a sort of mixture of neoclassical and Gothic revival stuff, which is so typical of this very early Gothic revival. Here we have again this lovely, big, solid 13th century masonry. And round, there's the Gell Chapel. I'm going to watch my feet slightly here, because if I trip over a gravestone, I can do myself a mischief, and it's not going to be very good for the camera. There we have the transept. And the great central tower. It's a magnificent building here. And as I said in the previous video, in the 1830s, you've got this young man, Frederick Tryon, who is the curate. Now, probably he would have lived in one of these houses around, but he wouldn't, because he lived with his friend in Cromford, his friend Mr. Arkwright in Cromford. And of course, the reason he gets the curacy here is that he's got this friend who's an Arkwright. Here we have the door. This is the accessible entrance. So Godfrey Arkwright's an Arkwright, and the Arkwrights are really, really rich. They're really influential here. So if Godfrey Arkwright comes and says, well, look, my young friend here is looking for a curacy, then the vicar at Wirksworth goes, oh, absolutely, yes, yes, I can give a curacy to your friend, Mr. Arkwright, because you're an Arkwright. There's a lot of money there. You can see here again how we're in the middle of the town, and here's the ancient churchyard cross. And that building over there with the turret is the town hall. And can that be the old vicarage? I think it may be. This tells you, of course, how important the vicar was. That you'd have people who had quite a lot of money, and what this meant, of course, say Frederick Shrine, he comes from a landed gentry family, very, very wealthy family, and this is the kind of person who provides a lot of the clergy for the Church of England at the time. And certainly these bigger churches, what you're looking at is, you're looking at somebody who can shoot, who can hunt, who can mix in high society. Someone who comes from a really posh background. It's rather different today, of course, but back in the day, you're looking at someone like Frederick Shrine, who's from a really posh household. Now, he's also an evangelical, and his emphasis on experience, because reading the Bible, he sees people rejoicing with joy unspeakable and full of glory, and he says, well, I don't. And reading the Bible, he comes to this realization of Christ died for me, and he's so happy. He goes and visits his vicar, and the vicar basically says, oh dear young man, you don't get so overexcited, you could be mistaken, don't tell anyone. And it all causes a bit of a ruckus, and eventually a rift between Tryon and the vicar, and Tryon goes on elsewhere to Prestbury in Cheshire, because being a rich young man from a good family, not a lot of difficulty getting a curacy. So, but there we have it. That's just one of the men who's involved here. Frederick Tryon went on to become a Baptist, actually, a strict Baptist minister. He left the Church of England, had crisis of conscience, really, over the whole business. So there we have it. That's outside at St Mary's, Wirksworth, in the middle of the town, and it's this sort of oasis, away from everything, behind everything, but in the centre, and that everything kind of moves and works around it. So that is St Mary's, Wirksworth. I'll just say a few words in closing. So we've gone all around the outside at St Mary's, Wirksworth, as well as around the inside. It is one of these lovely market town churches, and it's quite a complicated building, as you can see, because it's cruciform, because it's got these chapels coming off the chancel. It's a building that has all sorts of interesting corners to it, both inside and outside. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've enjoyed going around this building. I certainly have. It's always lovely to visit this place again. So until next time, may God bless you and keep you.